My name is Amy Berube. I am a social worker with the Highlands. My connection with Bath Brunswick Respite Care is that I have the pleasure of being on the board in the past. I had to drop off of that because I was caregiving for my stepmother at the time with my father, and so it was a really great go at it. I was on the board when the lease was signed for this place, so it's wonderful to see it up and running and doing so well. And then currently I run a support group at Bath Senior Center on the second and fourth Thursdays of the month at 9:30. Thank you for nodding your head so that I get my details right. And so that is in conjunction with the Alzheimer's Association, because I do have certification through them to lead support groups, but I've been leading support groups for 20 some odd years. So besides personal history and connection with cognitive decline and running support groups for over the last 20 years or so, this is a field or a little piece of being able to be present for individuals and their caregivers that I developed at the Highlands. I have nothing formal for it. I've never actually done a group presentation, because normally what I'm doing is identifying with couples at the Highlands, one who's caregiving for another, that this is indeed the situation, and inviting family to come in and sit down and have a conversation. So it's contingency planning is what I call it, and contingency planning is simply the what if. And this oftentimes weighs very heavily on caregivers' minds. So it's a lovely opportunity to just be witness and partner to that, but then also be the holder of that plan potentially for them. So I like to start the session with having the individual who requires care, the individual who is primary caregiving, and then whoever else might be sort of filling in that plan. And so it's a little difficult to kind of get the right players at the table sometimes, but what that means is who would be there for first call. I start off every single caregiver or contingency planning meeting with a question to the individual with cognitive decline, and I ask everyone not to answer for them. What would you do if spouse, partner, whomever does not wake up in the morning, or you find them on the floor and you can't get them to wake up, or they're not around? What would you do? And the answer is oftentimes a very telling one. I was born before 911 existed. If my memory slid back to that childhood time of mine, I would not know to call 911. I know that now, but I definitely would not know that. So I've never gotten the right answer. Usually the individual with cognitive decline answers, I would call my doctor's office. I would, here at the Highlands, I might call at the front desk. I might. So there's a real lack of awareness in the individual what to do. So when that is our starting point, in that the person who is left standing, the person needing care, can't identify what to do, we need to create some safety for both of them. I recently got a referral where a couple were in the home, and one was on the floor, the other, it was a situation where probably days they had been in there. The person needing care had not eaten, didn't understand what was going on. It did result in the passing of the individual who was on the floor. And so now they're just trying to search for the right place. So it's really very, very important to have some sort of protection if the individual who's caregiving cannot respond. So oftentimes what I recommend is getting a lifeline for the individual who is caregiving. So if you fall to the floor, you're not feeling well, you can press that button. And that's oftentimes the easiest way to get help originally. At a community such as the Highlands where I live, there's oftentimes neighbors looking in on one another, recognizing patterns. You know, lights are always on for breakfast at this time, lights are always off at this time, and recognizing if someone is not following their established patterns of behavior. So we have sort of different resources at our ready than most may, but I learn about resources and ways of looking at that this sort of situation through my conversations with people. So my best recommendation is to get a lifeline for the individual who is doing the caregiving. And
phone calls every day and just check in, and that might be a good option. If that's a concern, is just having someone who calls the caregiver and says, "Good morning, how are you? Still good? Good."
Yep. And I think there's good morning programs in Brunswick.
Yes,
yeah, so that's a great resource.
Yeah,
Thank
those
you
are
for
options.
pointing that out. Yep.
If anyone has questions, please give us a call or email and we'll get those to you.
I have a question for Amy.
Certainly, Leslie.
Obviously, Dick and Jane had a wonderful resource in you to help formulate this.
Yep.
But a lot of people would not know how to do this if
Yeah.
they're not in the Highlands.
Mm-hmm.
So how do we help people find somebody who will facilitate this process? Because this isn't something that's easy to do necessarily for an individual.
That's correct. Well, I think that there are social workers who do private pay work. I do think that this is something that I could easily facilitate here a couple of times with Ashley or someone else, and you can pick the skills up. I don't think there was any particular skill set involved other than just caring about somebody, and also kind of knowing a little bit more about what it takes in an individual home, sort of how things kind of happen and whatnot. But I think that I could certainly provide education about that. And part of my job at the Highlands is to be a resource for the community. So if people wanted to reach out to me, I certainly would be happy to do this. It really is an honor and a privilege to be able to be involved with people's lives. And so happy to do what I can, but to also teach others to do this.
Yeah, because I don't think the average person in this situation that doesn't have some good connections would know exactly what do I do? Who do I even speak to about this?
I think that my role is just that sort of facilitator of a conversation. It's not necessarily, like, I think there are many families out there that could do this kind of conversation themselves. I really do. But if the dynamics are a little bit sticky, or there's not generally frequent conversations, having somebody to facilitate, I think, would be very helpful.
Yes, very much so.
Yeah. You know, and I hear this, having led support groups, is that oftentimes it's very difficult to get, say, Dick and Jane and the kids, or family, sort of whomever the wider support group is, you know, on the same page in terms of need. And that's where oftentimes a professional coming in and being like, this is necessary.
I still giggle about it.
Go ahead. Humor's the best way. But sometimes family can really need to have a professional, like a doctor or someone else, say, kiddos, this is serious. What, Dick or Jane is doing is a lot of work, and we need to also support them as a caregiver by having conversations like this, by spelling them, as giving them some relief is what I mean by spelling them.
Do the medical community tend to facilitate that need when they need the people?
Not
really,
necessarily.
no.
I came up with this all on my own,
But
and this is the first
yeah.
time I'm talking about it publicly outside the Highlands, so probably not.
So they don't suggest you need to get a plan in place?
Oh, they may.
They
A
may.
good geriatrician will,
Yeah.
yes.
Wow.
But not necessarily how that happens.
Yeah, no.
And sort of the
Yeah.
details in, like, can that individual be by themselves for an hour or two? Does that individual really need to have someone with them? And oftentimes, the answer is going to be they need to have someone with them because they've just watched their loved one being carted out of the house by EMS. So that anxiety, whether there's enough cognition to understand what's happening, that anxiety is real, and those hormones are going to stick in your body for quite a while. So having someone there to help ease their concerns and be able to help them be soothed is, in my opinion, essential. So, yeah.
I honestly never thought of it. I was a caregiver, it never crossed my mind that I should, I think that when we're caregivers, we just go into caregiver like Superman mode. And we're like, I will be it forever and ever, and there will never be a problem. And reality is, there can be any number of problems. And I never had anything set up, and it was just, good luck that I never needed it.
Right.
And same thing with me.
Never
When
thought
she's
of it.
saying this, I live in horror about, oh my God, I should have done something.
Well, there were so many things that we were, freaking out about at the time. This just was on the back burner. We never thought about it.
Yeah.
And you're aging in place, like we're, for instance, I'm just projecting in the future how it might feel. I mean, we're down a Little Bird Road. We have one full, year-round neighbor. So should I ask him if he'd be our contact? My kids wouldn't arrive for,
An hour.
an hour
Ish.
minimum, probably.
Yeah.
And so I'm wondering if technology how that can help like the Lifeline people. Can they actually make calls to the emergency people?
Oh yes, I believe that's part of the service. I
So
can't
that-
speak
don't know,
for
just-
Lifeline or any Lifeline-like products, but
Right.
that is part of it. So you call them or
So
you
there's
press.
just one number to call or to have
So
who then makes other calls? I mean,
yeah, so if you
a
press your
wraparound
Lifeline button, usually the receiver in the home will it'll connect to somebody live.
service.
And that individual will then,
Yeah.
Mrs. Hemingway, are you okay? And, if you don't answer, they will likely send EMS to the home.
Okay. But as far as getting the help, to help
Yeah.
immediately, I mean,
I think
it's a big question.
yes, I think you all could be, support for one another in a situation like that.
We're lucky we have 2 kids who would be willing to get there eventually, but so many people don't. And how do you sort of have the courage to have that kind of a close relationship with a neighbor who doesn't even live on your road,
Right,
I'm thinking
right.
rural living.
Well, in a situation like that, if EMS can't get someone there, again, can't speak for them, but I would think that they would want to take that individual with cognitive decline to the hospital to just ensure their safety. If it's with that kind of agitation, wandering is at an increased risk. Obviously, if you are in a more rural area, you do not want anybody wandering off in the middle of the night and getting lost on top of that. So I think EMS would take with. Yes. Do you have any?
Well, we've had the fire department and the police department come to talk to
Oh,
us.
perfect. You have
Yeah,
real
and
life
they gave
information.
great information, and they suggested that you have all this information, pretty much what you're talking about, medication schedules and things like that, and emergency contacts on your fridge, so that when emergency personnel come in, they know who to call, especially if you're the caregiver for someone, because that was a question that came up. Then emergency personnel, after having taken care of you, will know who to call to come get the person you're caring for.
And those good morning programs also, if they call and they don't get an answer, they've got a whole
Right.
protocol of what they do.
Yes.
They don't necessarily call a family member, but they know how to get a hold of somebody to go do a wellness
Right.
check.
Well, I
Is
think
it a
this,
volunteer thing? Or
Yes,
do
it
they
is.
volunteer?
Yes.
Yep.
Yes, it's a very good
Yeah.
program, and they welcome volunteers. It's
Yeah.
in almost every community around one form or another.
Yes. Yeah. Usually through
Yeah.
the police station,
Yes.
I believe.
yeah, and I think this kind of like highlights the point, like we talked about in support groups, that like we need support systems, and I think it's important as we age to build those support systems, because there are so many people I talk to that again are like, down dirt roads, and maybe their 5 closest neighbors are not neighbors anymore. Maybe they're Airbnbs and they're seasonal, or they're
Right.
Not
renters, or they're not home, or they're traveling, you know, and you just can't necessarily rely on a neighbor swinging by at this point. So kind of building
Correct.
that support system is really important.
Yes, yes. You know, and the closest person may not necessarily be the person who stays the longest, but it could be someone who stays just long enough for a family member to come in. And I know through personal experience that unless you're with someone on a very frequent basis who requires care, you're a little at a loss as to what to do when you walk through the door. But at the same time, at least the heart and the intention is there, right? So, and they would be able to ask for further assistance, I'm sure, so.
I did talk to someone who has a binder, which I thought was a great idea.
Yeah.
And the binder had like a picture of the person needing care and the new caregiver. And so they could go through and see like, see, this is us together, we know each other, there's all the information. And it was really easy to just hand the binder off, and like, we knew it was in the house, so.
Great, great, yeah. So, back to what you mentioned about putting things on the refrigerator. I don't know where they're located any longer, but there are, they're little packets, they're red vinyl with magnet, they're called File of Life. And they stick to your refrigerator, and they have this little card that you can take out and fill in. I know we have them just specifically for us at the Highlands. It used to be a big deal, but File of Life is something you can probably look up, or something that you can, I know that they even make magnetic picture holders that you can slap on the side of your refrigerator, so if it can hold a picture, it can definitely hold, you know, a card with some information on it. And so if you put that on the refrigerator, EMS are generally looking at that as well. But the good thing is if you had a Lifeline like product, they're gonna call other places, not just 911 on your behalf. So,
What is it, File of Life?
File of Life, it's called.
You mentioned something, before Lifeline, it was Ring.
Oh yeah, so a Ring system, or there's lots of different kinds of home monitoring products that you can get nowadays. So, you know, yes, that's a File of Life, yeah. So you can set up cameras inside a home, you can set up cameras outside a home, and they go instant notifications on phones. So I know that we have something kind of a sensor in our apartments, not in the homes at the Highlands, but in apartments, that if there's no movement for 24 hours, it alerts us, and then we would go to somebody's apartment. But generally they're going to a meal every 24 hours because they get one meal included. So if they don't show up to a meal, we're knocking on the door. So that's an extra check-in. But yeah, you can, you know.
All kinds of things like that. I just haven't thought about it.
Yeah.
Seriously.
I never thought I would lose consciousness. That's
Yeah,
like the
right,
piece of it that,
It's like I might fall.
like I might fall and break my leg, but
Yeah.
We had a caregiver at the Highlands who had a TIA and was like immobile on the floor for a little while. And she was like, well, I was fine after 2 hours. I was able to move around and get up. And we're like, oh no. But her spouse did not know what to do. So she just basically, you know, told him to hang tight.
she could still speak.
She could still speak, interestingly enough, but obviously with most strokes, that's not an option. So, you know, that's why if you get an emergency Lifeline-like pendant, you know, probably press that, or at least if you're falling, it's gonna catch you in that sense.
Maybe my Apple Watch would.
Apple Watches are phenomenal, yes,
They
I don't see it
never
on,
even fall.
but they
I
do,
like it.
they do.
I'll wear it.
Never think I can make
They're
it.
only as good. So yeah, Apple Watches also have some great safety features. I'm not an Apple user, but I know that, I know you have grandkids who can definitely help you out
Oh,
with
yeah.
that, so.
Yeah, they have impact alerts now, which
Yeah.
are really helpful.
They do,
Yeah.
and I've got one, and I probably 3 or 4 times something has gone, I haven't been doing anything that I thought was wrong, but I've moved suddenly, or I've moved in an odd way, and I get this alert, are you okay? If you're not, if you don't respond, we're gonna send,
Yeah.
emergency services,
Yeah,
that's why I have to respond.
And
So
they
that's
know where you are
perfect.
just by GPS.
Yeah, well, they know, yes,
Yeah.
it's all.
Yep,
it's all
so there
right.
we go, you don't even need a lifeline, you just.
And you can have it go to someone else's phone too.
Yes, it can go to,
a
it can go
child
to.
Yes.
or something like that.
Yes.
Really?
Yeah.
Yes, it can even, I think they can even send health information, like heart rate and all that other stuff
Yeah.
to other places.
Technology.
Last
Yeah.
time she moved, you know,
Yes,
10
Yeah.
hours
Okay.
ago.
right, but.
I set it off shaking out loud, because I was making violent
And
movements.
your heart rate,
Yeah.
yeah.
I know, and they just said, it looks like you've fallen, or,
Yeah.
you know, and, so, that was just
Too
so
sensitive.
gotta be
Teach you to
careful
shake your
shaking up
eyebrows.
roads, which is kind of, because you know, I was doing the.
That's a great resource, thank you for thinking of that.
Yeah.
Any
Gotta read the
other,
directions.
yeah,
I'll figure out how to use it.
YouTube.
YouTube, right.
Any other questions at this point? Maybe short and sweet is okay, right?
No, I mean,
No,
you're only less than 10 minutes short, so this is beautiful. Thank you. That was
Okay, and I'm happy
really
to
helpful.
answer any individual questions people may have. I've got business cards over here. I'm always happy to answer calls.
Marvelous, thank you, Amy.
You're very welcome.
That was
Thank
great.
you all
Yet
for
another
staying
thing
out.
that we never think of as caregivers.
One more thing to do, right?
But so important, like I feel like that's one of the probably most important things that I could have done as a caregiver and I didn't do it.
Well, luckily you didn't need it.
No,
Oftentimes
no.
they're not needed.
Yep.
But, yeah.
I still can't believe I didn't think I'd lose consciousness.
Listening to like, who are you,
Oh,
Karen?
yeah.
Like, what? It's because we have superpowers.
I
We're
guess.
caregivers and we're just assuming that everything's gonna be fine.
Uh-huh.
Marvelous.